When a person is having a mental break, a lot of times it goes unnoticed because when a person is having a mental break, we expect it to look one way, but it can happen in a multiple different ways. And it can happen in ways where it can just really like go under the radar for so long, right? A lot of us think that when a person have a mental break, that person is supposed to be like extremely like extreme outburst. um Maybe they could be doing certain like, and that can be a manifestation of a mental break, like the extreme part of it. They could be just having like really extreme behaviors, right? When a person is having a mental break, that extreme behavior can be violence to themselves, self-harm to themselves, you feel me, or violence towards others. That can be like the extreme case of a mental break, you feel me. But then there are other mental breaks that a person can go through and a person can experience, and they don't even realize that they're having these mental breaks. You could have experienced somebody close to you go through a mental break and that shit went under the radar. I know I personally watched somebody go through a mental break right before my eyes, and I didn't even realize that they was going through a mental break until somebody brought it to my attention. And I knew something was off about that person, but I just couldn't put my finger on it. And then one day somebody said, you know, that person. And I'm like, yeah, all right. And I'm such a deep empath. The average person would not have been able to see it, right? They would have just brushed stuff under the rug. But because I'm such a deep empath, I I was like, wow, something's really off about this person. And that's not nothing to make light of because a lot of us struggle or have faced mental breaks in our life, whether that's internally, whether internally stuff that we haven't dealt with, or external things that has happened in our life, or both, combination of both for some people, right? And I see it in people's natal charts, and how certain aspects is set up in people's natal charts, and I'm like, wow, I see it more severe than others in other people's natal charts. I even seen it in my own natal chart, right? And that's how I was able to start helping others, because when I was going through my stuff, I was like, I learned my chart, and I'm like, okay, boom, there it is. Okay, boom, that makes sense. Boom, there it is. And I was able to like peel back the layers and deal with my own shit. But I couldn't deal with my own shit until, I'm sorry, I couldn't deal with other people's stuff until I was able to deal with my own shit. But a lot of times when we are faced with mental breaks, or we are around people, I'm not talking about people close to you, right? I'm not talking about somebody that you really know. I'm talking about, it could be a spouse, it could be a child, it could be a parent, it could be a best friend. They could be going through a mental break. We think that, oh, they have like I said, the extreme behaviors where the end result can be violence towards themselves, violence towards others. But the more subtle, there are so many subtle ways that a person can be having mental breaks. This can look like a food addiction. This can look like somebody who's a workaholic. This could work like somebody who's an alcoholic. This could look like somebody who just does escape stuff. They do stuff to escape. Anything, any form of escapism can be somebody having a mental break. It can be a XX addiction. It could be that too. But it can even be somebody that just lives in a constant state. They could a mental break can be somebody that could be living stuck in a time. They could be stuck in a time. Like they could just be stuck in the 80s. They could be stuck in the 90s. They could be stuck at a certain phase in their life. Like, let's just say this person is going through something in life, and maybe they had a good chunk of their life where it was just really good, right? It was just great. It was fantastic. That probably was the best part of their life. And that mental break can be, again, the disconnect, because that's what a mental break is, a disconnect from reality, and the need to escape from that reality, because that reality can be harsh, that reality can be traumatizing. So the way for that person to escape, again, could be through some type of addiction or extreme cases, right? But it could even be just them person living in a constant state. This person, for example, could have went to Disney World when they was 25. I don't know, I'm just throwing something out there. They could have went to Disney World and had the best experience. That could have been like one of their best memories. And that person could constantly live in that state right there. They're always talking about it. They're always like, and that happened, literally happened to me, not to me personally, but to somebody I know. Like, this person kept reliving. I'm like, why you keep reliving this? Why you keep reliving this? This happened X amount of years ago. But then I realized that probably was one of the wholesome and happiest memories that that person had. And in order for them to cope with whatever mental break they're having, they go to that place in their mind where that was the happiest or the wholesome moment, right? It's going to be different for a lot of different people. But I just wanted to bring that up because, I was, you know, after so many charts that you analyze, and people come to you and you see things and they share things with you, a lot of stuff, start to make sense. Now, there are a lot of different things that I have seen in natal charts, including my own, that can show mental health, right? If you are somebody that is advanced in astrology, you a teacher of astrology, or if you're a student of astrology, you can people have different techniques and different ways that they can see this. I know for me, some of the things that I can see in natal charts that can show people that have that struggle with mental health, harsh aspects to the Mercury. I don't think people realize how powerful our Mercury sign is. We talk about our Venus. Of course, we talk about our Venus because that's connected to love. That's connected to money. We talk about our sun. Most people, talk about their sun. Everybody ride for their sun sign. We talk about Jupiter, big Jupe. We talk about Saturn, karma, and all that stuff. But nobody talks about Mercury. We don't talk enough about Mercury, y'all. And it needs to be talked about in a astrology community. I'm sure it is, but the conversation around Mercury needs to be talked about because it is probably one of the most slept on signs. Now, some of the indicators that I've seen when people have an afflicted Mercury, like a Mercury in a harsh sign like Capricorn, right? Or is in a harsh sign next to the South Node, that can show an afflicted Mercury. When Mercury is next to Neptune, when Mercury is squaring Neptune, when Mercury is opposing Neptune, Mercury squaring Saturn, Mercury next to Saturn. Um, let's see, Mars next to Mars in a malefic. Mars is a malefic. Let's say Mars in Capricorn next to Mercury. That can show harsh mental illness, or somebody who has a fragile mind, or even the degree of the Mercury, like Mercury at the 11th degree, Mercury at the 29th degree, can show somebody that can have, afflicted Mercury or some type of mental illness. But there are so many aspects, y'all, but that's just a few I wanted to throw out there. So if you have some of that in your chart, or you know somebody that have any of that chart, let me know. Let me know what type of experience you have with having an afflicted Mercury and how you navigate through that.